A selectmen appointed committee of town residents who are working to facilitate the availability of affordable housing in Walpole. We really appreciate you all coming out tonight and those watching this recording. So we're going to have Gino Carlucci of PGC Associates, a consultant hired by the town who's been updating the 2018 housing production plan, to speak about it and explain exactly what these plans are and what does it mean for Walpole's affordable housing. And just so you know, everyone's feedback is welcome. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find the Housing Partnership Committee's contact information on the town website. We really value your input. So we've been working 10 months to update this plan and really move Walpole forward when it comes to housing. So thank you for coming, and Gino, do you want to get us started?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We'll start the slides.
You can use the microphone, please.
Oh,
Just,
yeah.
Should
I bring it over there?
You can just, it doesn't matter. You can bring that over there. We have enough cord.
It might be easier.
That's fine.
I'm used to using an iPad, so I tend to try to touch the screen. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about what is a housing production plan. We're going to go over the three major sections of it, which the first one is called Comprehensive Housing Needs Assessment, but I called it, for the purposes here, Demographic Statistics and Trends. It's a little bit more descriptive. Then the second section is Affordable Housing Goals. And third is implementation strategies. And after we go through the slides, we will accept questions and comments. So housing production plans, it's through, they're part of the 40B process. It's a program of the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. They're good for 5 years, and this is an update of the 2013 plan for Walpole. And as I had said earlier, it consists of three sections: a housing needs assessment, affordable housing goals, and implementation strategies. Now, the point of having a housing production plan, first of all, it provides guidance for addressing housing needs in the town, both affordable housing and general housing needs. But then also, if there's a two-step process through DHCD. Completing the plan under the guidelines that are provided by DHCD will result in approval of the plan, which is the first step. And then the plan needs to address how the town intends to meet its affordable housing goals under Chapter 40B, which is to reach 10% or, at a minimum, reach what's called safe harbor status, which means if you increase your percentage of affordable housing by 0.5%, you can get a 1-year safe harbor period during which, if a 40B application comes in, you have more authority over it. You can deny it, you can impose conditions or whatever. If you increase by 1%, you get a 2-year safe harbor. Those percentages are not cumulative, however, or they don't carry over. In other words, if you have a 4% increase 1 year, you don't get 8 years. You still get 2 years. So some of the highlights in the Comprehensive Housing Needs Assessment. Can I turn this around? I feel awkward looking at, I don't want to block the screen either, though. Okay. Much better. Okay, so some statistics. The 2016 median household income in Walpole was $99,000. In 2017, that had increased to $108,000, just about. And by the way, the 2017 data just came out last week after all these tables were prepared, which we knew that was going to be the case, but we had no choice. The population projections show Walpole growing slowly from just under 25,000 in 2016 to about 25,653 in 2030. So that's a projection that was made by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council in 2014. They're updating their projections, I believe, this January, and based on the development trends in Walpole, I have a feeling that those projections may go up a bit. Another major finding is that and this is not new or unusual to Walpole, but the population of people 65 and over is showing a significant increase. It was 15% of the total population in 2010. It's projected to be 24% in 2030. Conversely, the young people's under 24 population is projected to decline from 32% in 2010 to 23% in 2030. And currently, the housing stock in Walpole consists of, or 75% of it is single-family homes. Another major highlight is the dramatic change in the housing stock for new housing. From single family, Walpole averaged roughly between 35 and 40 building permits for single family houses for about a 10-year period prior to 2017. In 2017, it went down to, off the top of my head, I think it was 17. And in 2018, I think it's been 11 so far. But the number of multifamily units has gone up over 200, and we'll see a slide of that a little bit later. The median house value, $435,200 in 2016, up to $457,200 in 2017. Median rent went from $1,322 in 2016 to $1,421. The percentage of affordable units is currently 7.1%. It was 5.4 prior to Moose Hill 40B, so it's made a significant increase. And what I think is a very significant statistic in terms of affordable housing is 30%, over 30% of owners and almost 60% of renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's a 2017 statistic. And the standard for affordability of housing is that you spend 30%, that you don't spend more than 30% of your income on housing. So we got almost 60% of renters and just about half that of owners spending a higher amount. Household income in 2016 in Walpole, 61% of households earn more than $100,000 a year, but over 13% earn less than $50,000. This data is from the what's called the American Community Survey. It's a program of the U.S. Census Bureau, and the same data shows the median at 99,102, and I know median means half below and half under, so 61% over 100,000. It doesn't add up to me, but I'm just relaying the statistics that are shown. Okay, getting back to the projections by age cohort, as I had said earlier, you can see in the first three, or the 0 to 24 age group is declining a bit, whereas the 65 plus is increasing pretty significantly, while the population is growing slightly, though again, maybe that will change a bit when the new projections come out. This is not unique to Walpole. These figures include Walpole and all of the abutting towns, and you can see it's exactly the same trend in the region, which is not really surprising. The housing types in Walpole, as I had said earlier, 75% currently are single-family homes. That's about to change significantly. But compared to Massachusetts and as a whole, and of course Massachusetts as a whole includes all the cities, Boston, Worcester, et cetera, only 52% of houses are single-family homes in the state as a whole, and many more, over 10% are buildings of 20 or more units, as this shows. Here are the building permit trends, as you can see. This only goes back to 2013, but I remember from the 2013 plan, the single-family building permits were roughly in the same neighborhood. And then it changed dramatically in 2018 with only 17 single-family units and 201 multifamily. And that's just so far in 2018. And then the next slide shows the multifamily projects currently in development. So there are a total of 822 units in process. Some are age-qualified villages, some are market rate, some are rental. But except for Moose Hill, none of them have a requirement for affordability. So they're all market rate except Moose Hill. The good news in terms of 40B about Moose Hill is because it is a rental, even though only 25% of the units are affordable, all 157 units count on the subsidized housing inventory. So in terms of reaching 10%, usually the easiest, most effective way to get there is with a 40B rental project, because you get kind of 4 times the count of the affordables. So currently, Walpole's affordable housing status, there were, and by the way, the 10% figure is applied against the number of housing units counted in the 2010 U.S. Census. It doesn't change during the interim. It stays at, in this case, 8984. And just again, statistics can vary. If you look at the 2010 U.S. Census, actually it shows 9,040, but the DHC figure, which is the one that counts, shows 8984. And the latest DHCD publication shows the percentage at 5.4%, but since that came out, the Moose Hill units were submitted and it bumps it up to 7.1. So that gives a total of 642 affordable units in Walpole. To reach 10%, 413 more would be needed. Then it's 2018. The 2020 census is just 2 years away, and the housing count will go up significantly. As you saw in the previous slide, 822 units in development of multifamily alone, plus the 68 of single-family homes, plus more to come in the next 2 years. It's easy to slip back on the affordable housing count. Yes.
So that 413, is that taking into consideration the market rate housing that's currently under construction, or is that the current inventory? We need to add 413.
That's just to meet the 10% based on the 2010 census units. That's what I was saying. The 2020 count is likely to be around 10,000 units versus 9,000 now. So that's 100 additional affordable units would be needed to get to 10%. Yes, correct. Yeah, in fact, I think I have another slide. Well, this shows this. I'll get. I think it's 109, or there's a specific number I have shown in a later slide. This shows the surrounding towns and where they stand. So you can see 3 towns have met the 10% so far. Walpole's kind of in the middle. Dover is way down. Norfolk is below us as well. And again, this is showing 5.4. We're really at 7.1. Okay, this is a bit of a repeat of what I said before, that 30% of income, if you use more than 30% of your income for housing, that's considered not affordable. And then the percentages currently of Walpole residents, 30% are already, of owners are already beyond the 30% of income, and almost 60% of renters are beyond that. And by the way, not only are they above 30, but most of that is above 35%. As you can see, 20% of owners, 21% of owners are higher than 35% of their income, and 48% of renters. So next is the affordable housing goals, which were developed by the Housing Partnership. And if you can read those, one is to create affordable units that fit into the town, that comply with the character of the town. Second, to review and amend the zoning bylaw to encourage more affordable housing. 3, increase the number and quality of units for seniors. As was shown, the number of seniors is growing rapidly. And also increase the number of home ownership units for first-time buyers. And that reminds me, one thing I didn't point out is the age group of 25 to 39 was also growing somewhat, not as fast as the seniors, but that's the group that would be first-time home buyers. So that this goal fits in to address that issue. Goal 5, increase the supply of affordable units for persons with disabilities, also for veterans. Identify public and privately owned property that can support housing development. Encourage new housing in areas close to services and amenities like downtown and East Walpole, and a lot of that is already happening with those multifamily units. And encourage the development for very low income households, and that's primarily public housing in the Walpole Housing Authority. So to address those goals, there are several implementation strategies being proposed, starting with to amend the zoning bylaw to encourage affordable housing. And number 1 on that is to adopt an inclusionary zoning bylaw. What that is a requirement that any housing development, usually it's over a certain size, like at least 6, sometimes it's 10, has to produce a minimum percentage of affordable housing. Oftentimes it's 10%, because 10% will at least let the town keep pace with the requirement. Sometimes it can be 15% or 12%. That way the town makes progress as well as keeping pace. Chapter 40R district, otherwise known as a smart growth district. And what that is the state has a program where you zone what they call eligible areas, which usually means a downtown or a district where there's lots of services and goods, so like maybe a shopping center, though doesn't exactly fit that well, or a transit station is the perfect example. And there's 2 aspects of 40R. The first time 40R was, when 40R was originally adopted, it had pretty hefty density requirements. Those were, let me remember here, I think it's 8 units an acre for single-family homes, 12 units per acre for townhouse development, and 20 units per acre for multifamily housing. And part of the program is to provide incentives for towns to adopt it. So there's a what's called a zoning incentive bonus to towns for just adopting the district. There's a payment depending on the number of units that could be developed there under the new zoning. And it's not the total number of units, but it's the increment over the previous zoning, over the underlying zoning. And there's also an additional payment of $3,000 per unit when a building permit is issued. 40R was amended a few years ago to create a starter home provision. In that provision, the density requirement is 4 units per acre, and it comes with, because it's intended to serve as starter homes for people, it has a maximum size of house you can include in there, and I think it's 1,850 square feet. It has the same payment incentives as the original 40R. Open space residential development. I know Walpole had a provision for this, and it was removed from the zoning bylaw, and it was proposed again last year unsuccessfully, but it's another thing that can be considered, and that's not necessarily a housing-oriented program, but it can be designed to encourage affordable housing. Also, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like a cluster zoning where the number of units that can fit on the land under conventional zoning is calculated, and then they're clustered onto a smaller area so that the remainder of the parcel can remain as open space or conservation land or recreation land, parks, however it's designed. Accessory apartments. While accessory apartments generally do not count as affordable apartments officially on the subsidized housing inventory that DHCD maintains, they can serve as a practical, affordable alternative in a number of ways. For example, an older person or couple who's lived in the house for 30 years, they're having a difficult time, they're retired now, they may not be able to pay the taxes and the upkeep, and if they can create an accessory apartment, it helps them stay in the house, it helps keep longtime residents to remain in town, and especially if they're active in town and such. And conversely, accessory apartment can serve as a help to a young person or a young couple just starting out who can't afford a house or a brand new apartment. It gives them an option to get started. And transfer development rights, that's a bit of a tougher one to implement. The best way to think about it is like open space residential development, only instead of the same parcel, it involves 2 separate parcels. So you would figure out the total development rights on both, but put everything on one, and the other remains as open space. So where you want to see higher density, that would be a receiving area, and where you want to preserve open space or rural character, that can be designated as a sending area. Next is to seek out state and federal resources and programs, and one very popular, common program is to create an affordable housing trust. and that is an entity that's created by the town, and it can subsidize or build itself or purchase itself housing to be made affordable. And oftentimes a great funding source for an affordable housing trust is the Community Preservation Act, because at least 10% of funding from the Community Preservation Act has to be dedicated to housing. Walpole doesn't have that. Another way is through the inclusionary zoning bylaw. One way a lot of inclusionary zoning bylaws work is usually there's three options, or there can be three options. You include it in the development, you include the affordable housing units in the development, or you create affordable housing units off-site, and that can mean purchasing existing housing that's out in the community. And that kind of has a double effect, because it converts market rate housing to affordable housing. So it increases the numerator and decreases the denominator at the same time. But the third option is to make a payment in lieu of providing the affordable units. And that payment in lieu of can go to an affordable housing trust, who can then use the money to build or convert affordable housing elsewhere. Additional public housing is another strategy, which we discussed earlier, the need to address very low income households, and also local initiative projects, local initiative program, or LIP projects. And what those are 40Bs, or friendly 40Bs is usually what they're called. And that's where a developer comes in and the Board of Selectmen agree to endorse the project, and it's just so it's all done on a friendly basis, and usually it's because it's in an area that's desirable for additional housing, or there's features of the housing that are attractive to the town, or whatever reason, but it's a friendly 40B. And next, utilize local resources, the most prominent of which is the Housing Partnership, which is spent, as Andrew said earlier, the last 10 months putting together this housing production plan, but it's also been doing research, much research on the affordable housing issue in general, and how to advance the goal of reaching 10%, and in general providing, addressing the housing needs of the town. And finally, get back to the numerical targets. As mentioned earlier, the 2010 housing count was 8984. To reach 10%, we need 413 more. To reach safe harbor, we would need to develop 45 units a year, or in 1 year, and that would gain 1 year of safe harbor, or 90 units, which would gain 2 years of safe harbor. And so if we reach 10,000 total units in the 2020 census, on top of the 413, there's another 102 that would be needed to bring it to 515. And yeah, and then once we're past once the 2020 census results come out, which would be maybe 2021, it might be as late as 2022. After that, the safe harbor numbers would jump to 50 and 100. So the next steps, the Board of Selectmen will be reviewing this on December 18th, the Planning Board on January 3rd, and then it would be submitted to DHCD for approval in January 2019. And that's what I have. Now, any questions or comments? Yes.
Great information. A couple things. What do you think the impact of at least
Well, as I had said earlier, I think the population projections will likely go up for 2030. 2020 will have, and most likely the town will exceed the 2020 projection, and then the 2031 will go up.
And then my second question is, and it's just good information to have, how are we doing against like-sized towns in the Commonwealth as far as, number one, as close as they're getting to the holy grail of 10%, number one, and number two, did the partnership look at different ways other towns are implementing strategies to reach those numbers, that maybe we can take, change a little tweak, and be successful with that instead of starting at ground zero?
Well, first of all, Walpole's not alone. Many towns in the region are seeing this multifamily development. That seems to be the trend.
I think as you present this, especially to the two bodies here before you go public with it, having some base foundation of how we stack up against other towns is only going to help.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric, that's a great question about comparable towns. And, you know, one of the motivating factors for our first suggestion for the inclusionary zoning bylaw, maybe pairing that with a housing trust, comes from looking at Mansfield. And so I think of Mansfield as a town of very similar population overall, very similar median income overall, similar in terms of transit access and whatnot. Not identical by any means. But but one of the things they experienced when I spoke with Sean Burke, their town planner, was in the 90s they had a number of 40Bs hit them. And they adopted this inclusionary zoning bylaw before a lot of other communities did. And it really helped them out, and now they're well above 10%. And there are other examples, but that's a key point, I think. Before we go before these next few boards, we should present the other communities.
Because I
Yeah.
can tell you will run into some people wanting to get only up to that 10%, and you're going to run into people that want to go far exceeding that, and it's just a philosophical conversation for the town to have. But what will make that much easier to digest is if there are a couple comps. And, you know, there's no right answer here. I mean, I think what you will find is that we do a good job, not a great job. But I'm pretty much let the numbers speak for themselves. I don't know if
Okay.
that's the only time.
No, not at all. John?
An aspect that gets overlooked a lot, you might want to add to this plan, is monitoring of units once they're built.
Yeah,
That's a huge issue. People think the units are built, that's it, we're good. But especially if they're ownership units. I know for a fact that CHAPA does not actively monitor their units that they approve for a town. They count on the owners of that unit to come to them when they're ready to sell that unit and find out what the restrictions are as far as maximum percentage of profit they can make. But that's like, that's like an honor system. And if the person isn't aware that they have to contact CHAPA, then you run the risk of them selling that unit outside of the parameters. Now all of a sudden the town has to spend money on legal experts to kind of chase that money, and then the unit falls off your inventory. So monitoring is a key factor, and whether it's having a trust that monitors these units, whatever that mechanism is, it's important to make sure the units stay on the inventory once they're constructed.
Right, and it's a requirement of 40B to have a monitoring agent going forward. And that is something that a housing trust can do. It's something that a housing authority can do, and not necessarily just in its own town. I know that I believe it's the Barnstable Housing Authority is the monitoring agent for multiple other towns, other projects in other towns. It's a revenue producer for them. There are regional monitoring services up. I want to say I think it's like Bedford area, and 2 or 3 other towns with them. They have a 4 or 5 town regional monitoring group that monitors the projects in those towns. So that's something else to consider.
Another aspect is when affordable units are condos, What 40B can control is the condo fees. So although a condo may be affordable by the actual rent or the purchase price, the owner can jack up those condo fees as will to make up for that income they're losing because of those affordable units. I don't know if there's anything the town would do, but that's another kind of slip through the cracks method
Right.
that
That's right.
developers sometimes use.
Is that a common practice?
I don't know how common, but I've heard it happening, where they'll say, okay, we're jacking up your condo fees $200.
As long as it's consistent across all residents,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's a practice that is becoming no longer the exception, but the norm. I mean, Medfield just went through it, with North Street. They have two, very high-end developments, one being built now, one next door. There was a 40B that came on, but the condo fees were cost prohibitive, so.
Yes?
Yeah, did you do prioritization of which of those, that we should, the town should look at first? Was that the order that you presented them in, or any insight on that, or any opinion on that?
I do not.
I know we've talked about it as a board,
That's-
as a committee, but I was just
right.
curious whether you had any,
Right, I think they're pretty much in priority order, I would say. Inclusionary zoning seems to be
big one.
a big one and almost a no-brainer. Others may disagree, but it seems like a good way to go.
Why do you say no-brainer? Could you explain that more?
Yes, because it's a common practice in many other towns, and it does it at a minimum it keeps the town on track, so you don't lose ground. And it's not it's something that developers I don't want to say they expect, but they understand because it is a common practice in multiple towns. Other questions? No comments?
Nice job. Nice work.
Oh,
Very well.
thank you.
I have one question. I've heard from different sources that when 40Bs are developed, how the state, there's different ways that they can determine at what point it'll go towards each town's numbers, whether it's issuing a building permit or not. Can you clarify that?
Yes, yes, it actually, there's multiple points at which they can count. They can count, you can submit them to count as I think was the case with Moose Hill, when it's approved, when a comprehensive permit is issued by the ZBA, they'll go on the subsidized housing inventory. However, within 12 months, it has to go to the next step, which would be building permits. If it doesn't happen, then they come back off. And then the second step would be the building permit. You don't have to submit them the first time, so you can kind of.
So the town can manipulate if they don't want them to hit yet. They will
Yes.
be requested at building permit issue.
Yes.
Kind of, all right, so it's.
Yes. And that way you don't risk it coming off, once you give the, and then there's also a time limit with the building permits. Then it's the occupancy permits, supposed to come, I think it's 12 months again after the building permit.
Is that all spelled out in the 40B regulation?
Yes.
But we can look into.
You can work, the state will work with you on extending those deadlines if need be. We experienced that when I was in Rentham on the Ledge Street project, because the 40B project was a precursor to a commercial subdivision at the corner of Madison Street and Route 1 near the casino. The developer had to get their comprehensive permit before or they could come forward for their subdivision approval from the planning board. So that process took about 16 to 18 months. So that 1 year was coming up for the units to fall off the SHI because they hadn't started construction yet. So in talking with Mass Housing, they were very good. They said they are not in the business of taking units off a town's inventory. They want units to stay on the town's inventory. So if you have a project where you know you're coming up against that, you can reach out to the state and request an extension on that, and they will most likely grant it.
You can't delay it to occupancy permits?
I believe you can. Yeah, if you're trying to reach safe harbor, and you have one project that's ready, and then another one that's further along, you can wait until and then combine them so you reach safe harbor. Yeah.
You have to extend the safe harbor period.
Right. Anything else?
One issue that wasn't in the plan intentionally was this new program by Governor Baker, the Housing Choice Initiative program. And it's kind of, it would be the last step in our process, right? If, as I understand it, and maybe you can elaborate more, is if for towns that build enough housing to qualify for this program, in other words, they're demonstrating that they're adding to just overall housing. It's not just affordable housing.
Correct.
That they can then be eligible for some infrastructure grants.
Yes.
Do you want to just elaborate at all? I mean, that would come once we, get it accepted, but.
Yes, I don't remember the exact percentage, though. I think it might be 5%. Yeah, I think there's a 5% and a 3% threshold if you increase the total number of housing units over a 5-year period by 5% or 3%, you qualify for these housing choice grants. And I don't think it's necessarily limited to infrastructure. It's not required to be spent on housing. I think it's pretty flexible as to what you spend the money on. Infrastructure is a perfect way to spend it, but I don't think it's limited to that.
And given the pipeline you mentioned of development, 5% of our housing units is like 450 units.
Yeah.
And it seems like within a 5-year period, I don't know when, but we're going to get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're going to be eligible for that.
Yeah, the first round of that was earlier this year, so I'm quite sure there'll be a second round, and Walpole might get pretty close to that already, with depending on how fast that construction is going.
Thank you.
Andrew, one last question. Has the partnership begun to think about what the tactics are? I mean, these are great goals, but for longtime residents, these issues have always been here, number one. Number two, it's gonna take a mindset shift to make the progress, and what that number is still needs to be determined. But how have you had the discussion, okay, these are the goals, but how are we gonna actually achieve any of them?
We're getting there. This is just the first step in the process.
Right.
You're absolutely right. You got to think
you
about
gotta
how
start
to
thinking
get this
about
done. And to get it done, we're going to have to reach out to the public. And we've had 3 public forums or listening sessions, I should say, in October, and we have this one, a 4th one tonight. And we're going to continue to listen, hear what the community thinks, also do some outreach and education. And Gina's presentation is a perfect example of that. To tell people what's at stake here is, just like Liz is experiencing near Burns Ave, there's another 40B coming down the pike, and you're vulnerable, your neighborhood's vulnerable to it. It's good for residents, period, in its own right, affordable housing, because you may know graduates of Walpole High who are college graduates now and trying to move back into town and they can't afford it. And it's also good for businesses. If we want to attract more commercial investment, it's going to help businesses have a good labor force that can afford to live here. So there's a case to be made. You're dead right, Eric. Like, we have to think of tactics now. We've done all the study. This is all the kind of abstract stuff. Well, how can we implement it?
Well, and you have to be upfront too, because those are all very good positives. But we could also, toe-to-toe, come up with as many negatives on going forward on this. There's a reason why this town has not made progress in this area. And, starting with public safety, starting with a whole number of reasons why you might want to get up there, you want to control your own destiny to 10%. But I just just think, you know, the more tactical implementation and how you're gonna have a mindset shift, a sea change, if you will, is only gonna help you, if that's what the town wants to do, right?
Great point, and that's where our work begins now.
Right.
Hopefully, once this plan gets certified by the state, we can start having bigger conversations with the community, with the board of selectmen, with the planning board about how to get this done.
And one of the, couple other things, one is that there certainly is much more public awareness at the state level, at the national level about housing. So we can leverage that to have that conversation. And the second thing is that, you know, sometimes when the town has tried to do things, changing zoning bylaws, it's been a one-off. And that, it hasn't been very cohesive.
You think?
Yes.
But my friend Tom Burns that, I mean, that's a classic example of what the future looks like.
So we need, but having a plan where we have a number of related recommendations, you know, we can show how those work together to achieve, you know, some of the, what we need to do, and you know, so you know, there's an urgent need for housing, and you're right, you know, we need to be good about making that message and explaining about the need and showing people how we can get there in a very, you know, easy or safe way, or
In a systemic way.
yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I joined, is to
No, I know, yeah.
kind of be a bridge between the opposition, since plan focuses on East Walpole, and there's gonna be division. in
Well,
town.
yeah, I would only
So-
encourage you, I don't know if it's opposition more than, this is a hotbed issue in any town. In our town, it's elevated. I don't think we have done a great job, and I take some of that responsibility of taking a good hard look at this and trying to get to our state requirement as quickly as possible and then putting it to bed. But, you know, you wanna try to control your destiny to the best of your ability, or it's forced upon you. So, anyway, this isn't my meeting, I just was interested, so I'll shut up.
I have a question for Andrew. So, this is a draft plan?
Oh.
Just one thing.
No. So that,
There's gonna be more, right?
yeah,
The
oh yeah. I
draft
should-
plan is 2 pages long.
Yeah. I should clarify. So the way this plans out, what Gino was presenting tonight in his presentation, all those facts and figures, are highlights from this 53-page draft plan that we've reviewed, that the Board of Selectmen has had in hand, that the Planning Board has had in hand, for almost 2 weeks now, and a week and a half now. And so we're gonna have further conversations, further edits that Gino is responding to before it gets voted on by those 2 boards and our board as well. So this is just for the public who just walked in, never heard of anything about affordable housing.
Okay.
But yeah, there will
I'm
that.
relieved.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
We're gonna make a one-page.
Yeah. That 50-page plan will be available to the public once we finalize the edits of the various boards. We wanted to wait to hold that and also get people's feedback tonight before, so that it's incorporated in that plan.
Right.
And then your
Yes.
thoughts are that would be available near the end of January, is that what I heard?
At the latest, my thoughts are that it could be available publicly mid-January.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Does that sound reasonable to you? Do you know?
Absolutely.
It's about 95% of the way there. I mean, would you say that, John?
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you know, you can look at the 2013 one to get an idea of like, what, I mean, it's an update of that plan. So if you want to know more about like what is a housing production plan, what kind of things are going to be in it, you can look at the old one.
No, I'll wait for the.
You wanna read it Christmas?
I get that.
It's very good.
Yeah.
Well, if there are any other questions for Gino and the Housing Partnership Committee, please stick around. We're going to probably migrate, once this video clip is over, to a room down the hall and have a debrief within the committee. But that is a public meeting. There's an agenda posted. Anyone's welcome to come. It's in room 112. So we'll hang around here for 5 minutes. Please check out these wonderful poster boards of facts and information about housing in Massachusetts and in Walpole that are along the wall here. Sorry they weren't kind of put up against the windows, but thank you all for coming.
Yeah, nice
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you.